Welcome everybody to CLUSA's webinar training. My name is Michael Chang. I'm the Executive Director of APALI, which stands for Asian Pacific American Leadership Institute. And I want to welcome you to the first of our free webinars that you will be participating in. I want to thank you in advance. I want to hope that we will have very good sharing in these webinars, and that you will find both inspiration, support, sharing, and useful ideas for your internship program. So our first one is today. I just actually want to thank our team. We have a little team that's been working on this for, it feels like a month at least. So Ching Bai is actually very good at moving our team and organizing and a lot of the work behind the scenes. I want to also thank our speakers today, Andrea Hyde from ACI, Hong Chil from Ohio, APAPA, and they will be speaking to us today. So the theme for today is, what is an ideal public sector internship? Thank you. And so the idea here is, if we could go on to let's try this. Yeah, what is an ideal, right? It's something for us all to think about. What would a really ideal one have? What are the components? And you can think of this as stimulate your thinking. You can think of this as whether it is in line with what you're doing already. Are there things that you could improve on? Or if you're starting out, this might be a good checklist of things to consider, right? So the agenda for today is I'm going to be giving a short 20-minute little my take about what are the components of a ideal public sector internship program, right? And then after that, we'll have a little bit of time just to see if there are any clarifying questions. And then we will go to our sharing from our different groups. So Andrea Hyde is going to go first, and then Hong Chil from APAPA, Ohio, will also share their valuable experience. And so the idea here is to be as real as possible, right? And then after that, it will be your turn to share. And I would especially like to direct your sharing in a couple of ways. One is, how do you recruit, especially college students? So if you folks have experience recruiting college students, please share that, because that's a little bit more difficult. And then the second thing that we'd like you to share is about your efforts, creating internship placements in the public sector, which is the government sector. And so some folks have been doing this for many years. You've got great stories. You've got things that placements that other people may not even have thought of. So at that point, I'd especially like you to share about those, as well as any other questions that you might have. So moving along, so this is the two components, right, that I would like to suggest today as must-haves for an ideal public service internship. First component has to do with your own organization. How do you organize it? How do you get your people together? What are some assets that you might have for your program? And so that I put it under program design. So there are 5 components under program design. We're going to talk mostly about the 4 of them, and then the 5th one we're going to save for specialized webinar later on, right? So the first one is, what's your program concept? And I'm a believer that if you know what you're doing, you should be able to say it in one sentence. So you should be able to communicate what your program is to anyone, right, in just one sentence. And what would that sentence be, right? How would you craft it? And how much of an identity that you would give to that? That will give you a direction, and it will communicate to different people. It will communicate to students. It will communicate to government agencies. It will communicate to the community what you are about. The second one is organization and communication platforms. And I just want to put that in, is how do you get organized? And the area of organization that I want to especially push is online organizing. So for instance, today we're using technology, right? All the grantees are throughout the United States. It costs lots of money and also a lot of valuable time on everybody's part if we have to get together physically. So we're learning to work smart. How do we maximize working online in terms of meetings? Today we're using Zoom, right? Teleconferencing and other tools to get organized. Third is sharing a calendar, different kinds of calendar. It might be an administrative calendar in terms of how your organization is going to get organized, an internship calendar, which you share with the intern, and then finally, a whole community development and empowerment, right? So this piece is very important. So the vision of Sandy Chow is to support your community organizations, right? Your community organizations typically has a purpose of empowering Asian American voice and civic engagement. So Sandy says, well, let's put both of these together. It's a very good to have a training opportunities for students, especially in government, public sector. And then it's also very important to help our communities or help your communities become empowered and become part of the governing process and part of the government process. We use the civic leadership training program for students as a way to galvanize your community. So we want to spend a whole seminar, one of our webinars, to have you share your experience galvanizing your community, whether it be finding placements, coming together, working on a project together, fundraising, all those different components. So that is the first part about program design. The second part will have to do with student interns themselves. So this is the bottom line. Why are we doing this, right? A large part of it is really the students. And so we're very deliberate. We want to have everybody become very conscious of what they're doing, very knowledgeable about what they're doing, because it's a huge investment of your time and your resources and your effort on the students. So we want you to be as successful as possible. And so, so under that, we have 4 parts. The first part are the placements. You know, what are the kind of public sector government placements do you have, right? What are possible? Second one, who are the students that you should be recruiting? And how would you go about recruiting that? So it's important for you to have that on your checklist and to be able to improve from year to year about that. And thirdly, a very important thing is, what are the outcomes of the interns, right? What do you list as outcomes? What do you want them to say or go away after they finish their internship? And then finally, what would your training for them be? And because that's a big topic, again, we will have a whole webinar just to focus on intern training and have you share your experience training your students. So I'm going to go ahead and start with just a few words about them. So the first one is program design, right? So the first one is the concept. So I mentioned one sentence. So I just made up this sentence, right? Okay. So this sentence that I have, it's just an example, and I'll just read it. A summer student public service, government service internship program for Silicon Valley with an Asian American community empowerment approach. So you can tailor this to your own needs, right? But what you have in this sentence is a time, right? Is this a year-round internship? Most of the internships, because of the students' calendar, it's usually in the summer. So it mentions the summer time. It's for students, right? public service or government service internship. So it talks about it, that it's not other kinds of internships. There are many kinds of internships. So this one is a public service internship and gives it a location. So we're here, so I would say Silicon Valley. So Hong Chiu is in Ohio, so I'm sure Hong Chiu will say Ohio, or maybe a city in Ohio, or a region in Ohio. And then the last part is just additional identification if you want to, right? If you want to promote it as a community thing, then I would say an Asian American community empowerment approach. So the idea here is that it serves dual purpose, is to train the students, but it also builds up our community, gives us a project that we could work together and use this project as a springboard to get our community more organized, more engaged, more empowered, more so on. Okay, so the next one I want to mention is organization and communication. And many of you have done this for many years. You already have this. But as we all know, the trend is towards organizing online. So for instance, my own organization, APALI, all our meetings are online, right? Online is very good. So for instance, we're using video conferencing now with a platform called zoom.com. You can look into that. It's great. I love this because not only do we actually see each other, and we don't have to spend half an hour, 1 hour traveling to meet, but we could just jump online. We could do it, daytime. A lot of us are volunteers. We work, and so we could just jump on at night, and then we could do that. And the best part is that we can share documents right on there. We could share the screen, and we can work on each other's documents. So it is so useful. That's the main tool that we use. We hardly have face-to-face meetings. We only save those for retreats, but once we get things done, we just go on and do it like this. So I am a real believer in this kind of online conferencing meetings for organizing, and of course I'm not just selling from the platform I know, but there are other platforms, but Zoom is definitely a very decent platform. We also use a lot of Google sites for different things. So it's really useful to have websites, right? So a lot of you are familiar with websites. You can put all kinds of things for your interns on the website, right? You just ask them to go to the website. You can put documents you need for them. You could put the calendar there. You could use the website for all the things that you want to. So we use a Google site for our website, and we have a back end also for that, for organizing. And then Google Drive, this is just where we do our filing. All our filing is online, and that's where we do our sharing there too. And Google Forms is great for surveys. After every program we do, we always have a survey, an evaluation and feedback. And it's very useful. You can do it simply as on a scale of 1 to 5, or 5 being extremely, 4 being very, how useful has this program been for you? And then you can ask for comments, you can ask for feedback. Just a quick, easy way to do it, either when everybody's around. By the way, today after this webinar, you will also have an opportunity, in fact, you will be asked to join us in a quick survey for this webinar. Has it been useful? Did you get more information? Did you get more inspired? Are there things you could use? And that way, it gives us a sense of whether we are making a difference in what we do. Last thing that I want to mention is a application platform. So APALI typically does all its applications online, and the one that we use is called JotForm. It's very good. It's an online platform, and once you set it up, people just apply to that for that. So this is the organizations. I've focus on the online aspect of that. If you're interested, need more information, you can go on and find out more. Most of these are even free. So something to consider if you've not used it, and something that we are all learning. At least I've learned a lot about these in the last 3 to 5 years when we've been using these in earnest, and I certainly could recommend that without hesitation. And then, of course, organizations also need physical venues when you bring the students together, when you do your graduation celebration, and so those are all just part of the organization. Organization, of course, is also the team that you will bring together. Will you have, what's the sponsoring organization? Let's say you're APALI, Ohio. How does that organization support the internship program? Is it more like a working group? Is it more like a committee? And how do the internship leaders fit into that program? So you want to have that infrastructure to support this program in order for it to go further. And of course, for the internship program itself, it has minimally 2 leaders, right? One is the organizing leader, and in our mind, the organizing leader is the person that is especially in charge of kind of the outside in terms of getting placements, getting the graduation dinner, just thinking of all these connective parts. That's the organizing leader. The student training leader works closely with the students, right? Really have a relationship with the students and make happen all these training activities. So the 2 leaders can, of course, share roles, right? One would be a lead for each, and the other person might be supportive. So there are many ways that you can organize this for yourself. First thing I want to mention very briefly would be calendars. Useful to have an administrative calendar. So I'm showing an example of a calendar. Your calendar is going to look different from this, and I think some of our folks that are sharing today will share their calendar, right? So this is the one for one of our programs, a APALI program, and it shows the usual stuff. When is it open? When does the internship close? When's the deadline, and so on. The next calendar that I'm showing now is the intern calendar, and this is really facing the students. The students will use this calendar, and we make them commit to this calendar before we even hire them, right? And so we say, hey, these are the training days, these are the service days, these are the other days that we need you there, and so that's the training calendar. You will have a different training calendar. You will have training calendar including the intern graduations and other key dates that you need the interns to be there. And sometimes your calendar might be physical. We need to meet here because we're going to do an activity, right? We were going to do a simulation, or we're going to do some role playing. That we're going to role play working in an office, right? Or we're going to just do this, do that. So you need physical people to do that. Others, you can just do online. And so you might mention what those look like. All right. So next one, to finish the program design component, would be the community development and empowerment part, right? So this is, again, this is your support group, right? Your sponsoring organization, right? Are there other people in your sponsoring organizations that's going to help this internship, right? And what are the main purpose? The ones that I could think of would be these, right? To develop connections and relations to public government sector. So different people will know different people. Different people will go say, hey, let me work on that connection. Let me do this, right? Some people might step out and say, hey, I can help with getting some people to sponsor our programs, right? I can mobilize ourselves to also put in some resources to support these programs. So second one would be fundraising, right? The third one would be this graduation event, right? It's a graduation event, and it's meant for the students, but it's a way to showcase your community project. So it can have many sides to it. It's a celebration, it's got a social side, it's got a community building side. Heck, it might even have a political side. It's to let people know that where you're here, who you invite there, and how do you place this so that your program and your community will be stronger through this very public event, right? And so on. All right, so that would be it for the program design part. I want to take a little bit of time to talk about the student interns. So the first piece is just placement. So to be clear, this is a public sector or public/government sector internship program. What it is not a community internship program. It's not a leadership internship program, right? But it's a public sector, which means that you help students. So the rationale there is understandable. All our groups say that, hey, Asian Americans are still outside looking into government, right? We need people, more people to understand government, to work in government, to be in decision-making process, right? To engage in government and become whatever, government officials, elected officers, and so on. So your internship program is to help these young people, to inspire them to either work or somehow engage in government during their life, right? So that's why you want to put them in a government agency in order to do that, all right? So the kind of placements typically fall under a few categories. One big category, the biggest probably, is elected office. And there are many levels. So we're going to hear some people talk about their successful experience about, putting somebody in a federal or state representative's district office, right? A lot of these offices have staff, and they are geared up already to do internship. So you just need to present yourself properly, right? And develop those relationships, and then they could give you placements, and you might have an understanding. Each year we will send one person to your office, right? Or two persons to your office, right? Most of these are local level. Sometimes it might be at the state capitol, right? So there are many possibilities. So those are one. And then the local office holders, so depending on your situation, you might think of local office holders. Local office holders, especially the ones that have staff, would be your target, right? A lot of local office holders are volunteers. They do other things during the day, and they don't have staff. So you want to target the people who actually have staff. So for instance, in our area in Silicon Valley, the city where people would have staff would actually be San Jose City. They all have staffs, and so they have an infrastructure to support internships. So that's the one that we would go to. But don't just limit yourself to cities. So there might be county elected office positions, right? There might be others that you might consider. So the second area might be just government agencies. So for instance, you might get to know City Hall in a city and say that, oh, you have a planning department, or you have a community development department. Can we send an intern? What are your criteria? And you can work with that. You might even work with the city manager's office to take an intern, right, to help them with certain projects, right? So you want these to be good placements, right, where students are there to do real things and have exposure minimally to things, to decision-making, research, or just getting a sense of that. So government services will be agencies, and including special districts. Maybe here, it might be a water district. It might be a sanitation district. So there are many districts that actually have budgets, and actually some of them have internship programs. And if not, you can always approach them and say, hey, what about somebody taking on an intern this summer. We could send you somebody really quality, and let's see how it works, and you talk to them like that. One last area that was actually mentioned as we discussed when we're planning this, Hong mentioned, well, what about the judiciary? So that's something that you might consider too, right? Many aspects of the judiciary. It might be working in the Attorney General's office, as working at the Public Defender's office as an intern, or maybe even judges. There's a place for that. So again, as long as it's government, you see what your conditions are, and it never hurts to ask and build those conditions. And you want to see in your community who are people who can help you with this. Okay, next would be targeting students. So if you're thinking that you want students, so APALI, for instance, we've evolved. We've been around for over 20 years, and over time, we've paid more and more attention to students who are more likely to stay in the public sector, right? That will actually use this experience, because we spend so much time investing in them, right? That we want them just not to say, oh, that was kind of okay, that was a good experience. Yeah, but that's not really something that I would look into. So that would not be a high potential. So what you want to do, as even though this is very long term, you want to attract the attention, right, and the needs of students who are actually interested in government, interested in policy, interested in the public sector, and you want to each year be able to identify these targeted students. So in our experience, it's very important to recruit college students. So I know a lot of programs recruit college students who can share their experience. We're going to ask them to share their experience. How do they recruit college students? The reason with college students is simply that they are more certain about the direction that they are going, right? They are already taking things like, oh, I'm a political science major, right? I'm interested in policy. I'm an Asian American studies major. I'm already interested in that. And so the more you can talk to that kind of students, the more likely those students will have outcomes that says that they're going to do something with this, right? And we'll talk more about that. It's harder than recruiting high school students, right? But that's something you should really focus on. So I want to just say something about outreach for college. So as I mentioned, the programs that you want to focus on are areas such as political science. So you might develop a relationship, right, with your local colleges or through your networks to identify what students are majoring in. For instance, you might use your networks through your parents to say, oh, does anybody have children that are majoring in, political science or the humanities? Or maybe they're science. They want to be a doctor, but they're very policy-oriented. They want to be, but they're very interested in science policy. So you might put them like that. A lot of this recruitment is very targeted. If you find someone, you just send them a friendly email and say that, hey, we've been told that this is your major. This is something that you should really check out. We're looking for really good candidates, and we think you might be a good candidate. So a lot of times it's word of mouth as you develop. How do you target better and better these? So you can ask people to nominate. APALI use that tremendously. We just send out emails to lots of people. We tell them the criteria. We want, this is a government internship program. We want college students. We want, especially if they are interested in policy, in government, or these kind of majors. And we ask people, if you know anyone, please nominate them. Send them an email with this application and just CC me, and then we will follow up. So the other thing you can do with college recruitment is that you can directly develop relationship with college professors. You can find out who teaches political science, who teaches Asian American studies in the college and universities around you, right? You can ask them to push your announcements, right? You can ask them to nominate. You can develop a relationship. You might go say, hey, I want to visit you on campus to establish a relationship with you. And every year, can I just send this to you? Now you know me. And this is a great opportunity for your students. Some of your students will be very interested in this, right? And you just let them know a little bit, and then you just do it like that. So college recruiting is not easy, honestly. A little bit harder than just recruiting from your friends' parents or your own children and so on. But it has a ability to target students who are really interested in government a little bit better, right? And hence, the long-term returns to your internship is greater. High school outreach, you're probably much more knowledgeable about that. One thing I would mention is that you can also identify teachers, especially in high schools, especially the ones that teach leadership. Many high schools teach leadership, right? You can identify the ones that teach American history, American government, and ask them to make nominations. You can go to your community groups to ask them to make this kind of nomination. So 3 areas of recruitment: college, high school, and community. I don't want to talk about community too much because I think you have already a lot of ideas how to promote that. Okay, briefly about intern outcomes. So these are the outcomes that I would suggest for your program, right? So the 2 highest outcomes in the end, one is to inspire your students, right? And to prepare them to understand how they could prepare for a career, right? In civil service or as a legislative staff or an elected official, right? Okay? So first of all, they need to be turned on to these and say, hey, I can see myself as an elected someday, right? Oh, I can see myself. I didn't know what government jobs are like. Now I kind of know what government jobs are like. I like to do that. I like to serve people through that, right? And so that's number one, a career, right, in government in some ways, right? The second one, not a career, but citizen engagement. They should come out of your program thinking that, oh, wow, down the road, I don't mind. I like to be involved in government. I like to do that. I like to, I know what a commission is. There are city commissions, there are county commissions, there are voluntary organizations, and well, when I grow up, I guess, or when I'm even in college, if it's possible, I don't mind applying to one and see what it's like. So those are volunteers. And I put sometimes running for office under that volunteers because, as you know, a lot of local government office, whether it be school boards, local city governments that are not these major big cities, are really more like volunteer jobs. So you want to inspire your students as well as your community to say that those are things we think about. Those are things that we feel we can do. We have a right to be engaged, that we are good enough to represent people and want to do that. So I imagine those should be your most important outcomes, right? Other outcomes would be see how government works, how public policy works, how public decision-making works, right? And then another piece that I think is important that we always find that students care so much about, and most of our organizations are Asian American organizations of various kinds, which is how does our community fit into this, right? Why? How does it matter to us? So somehow an outcome for your students, I want to challenge you, is somehow through your internship programs, they learn more about Asian American history, right? A lot of times they don't know very much. honestly, a lot of us coming as immigrants, we have to read up on things like that. But it's really not that hard, right? To show them timelines and histories of Asian Americans, and then promote discussions of how do you feel as a Asian American? How do you look at your own identity? Do you like being Asian, right? What are the needs of our community? How do you see yourself? And they really appreciate it when you have that kind of platform for them to explore who they want to be, how they want to treat their ethnicity. Is that something they would be ashamed of, or would it be something that they would relate to, and how do they relate? It's a very rich area that we could talk about when we do student training more. And then, of course, the other things that I'm sure that you do, how do they present themselves, right, as young adults, right, in this public sector, right? How do they develop relationship with people? How do they go outside their comfort zone to talk to people, to take initiative, to make people respect them, to take on tasks and follow through? Okay, so that's basically it. The internship training, I won't say anything because we're going to have a whole webinar on that. Again, it's the same areas that we talked about: Asian American identity, Asian American demographics and issues, how to surface those things, what do you do in terms of office training, what do you do in terms of leadership training, what kind of civic engagement activities that you engage them in. So I think I've gone more than my time, but I hope that that was useful. So looking at the time, we're going to just delay the Q&A for this part to the general Q&A later, right? And that way we could give time for you to participate.